What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Paddock, and today we're going to talk about how to play an improvised solo over the jazz standard Take the A Train. I have done a lot of YouTube tutorials on how to read chord symbols, how to improvise, how to get started with it all, and every single time I do one of those tutorials, one of the questions I get is, how does that work in this tune or that tune? How do I apply this to a jazz standard? So today I decided to take a jazz standard and show you exactly how the chords work, how they go together, and a couple strategies on how to get started improvising over the song. So the song that we're going to choose is Take the A Train. The reason I chose this song is it's a fairly easy song to figure out, but it does still have a couple strange chords in it and a couple things that we need to talk about that you might not understand just by reading it from the first time. I am playing the alto saxophone, so I'm going to be doing it in the key of the alto saxophone, which is A major. So that means it is based on your A major scale. So your A major scale is from A to A with 3 sharps. So F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Now, a lot of your chords are going to be based around A major. That doesn't mean every chord is going to be in A major, but A major is where everything is related. So everything is going to kind of come back to how is that related to A major. So if we take a look at the first 2 measures, we have A triangle 7. We know the A tells us we are based in the key of A major. We know the triangle tells us that it is a major 7th. So we have A major 7. So those notes are A, C sharp, E, G sharp. So we're going to chord outline those 2 measures. We're going to go up, A, C sharp, E, G sharp, and then come down, A, G sharp, E, C sharp. Now, if you're looking at iReal Pro, which is a great app that you can practice jazz standards with, you'll see A6. As single note players, we are still going to play a major 7th. If you're a guitar player or a piano player, you're going to add that 6th in there so that you have a different kind of sounding major chord. But as single note players, we are still going to play it as an A major 7 chord. So your first two measures are really straightforward. We are in the key of A, and our first 2 measures are A major 7. So we're off to a really good start. Now we hit the problem chord in this song. The problem chord is a chord that's like a little different, that stands out. It's like, why is that chord there? And the reason for that is that's the chord that usually makes the song different. If you're just listening to someone solo over this song and you hear this next chord played, you're gonna be like, oh, that's Take the A Train because of that dominant 7th chord with a flat 5. So we have B7 flat 5. Normally we would see B minor 7 flat 5, but we see B7 flat 5. So that is telling us B, we're based on the B scale. The 7 is telling us it's the dominant chord, so the 3rd is major and the 7th is lowered by a half step. And then we have this flat 5. So the flat 5 is telling us to flat the 5th, which is an F sharp. So we're gonna take it down to an F natural. So if we have a root, a major 3rd, a flat 5, and a dominant 7th, a flat 7th, we have B, D sharp, F, and A, which is a bit of a strange chord. But again, that is the chord that makes it sound like Take the A Train. If you take that strange chord out of there, it no longer sounds like Take the A Train. Now, our next chord is a B minor 7, followed by an E7, followed by an A major 7. So why are we talking about all 3 of these chords, all 4 of these measures, back to back without breaking them down? Well, we are going to break them down, but the reason we're talking about them as one thing is because they are acting as one thing. They are acting as a 2-5-1. So the 1 is A major 7. The 2nd degree of A is B. So that's your chord there, B minor 7. So that is a 2 chord in the key of A. And then your E7 is the 5 chord in the key of A. So whenever you see minor 7, dominant 7th, major 7th, that is screaming 2-5-1. When we're playing a 2-5-1, the 2 is a minor 7. So we have B, D, F sharp, A. The 5 is dominant 7th, which means the flat 7. So you have E, G sharp, B, D. And then of course the 1 is just regular. So it's A, C sharp, E, G sharp. So it's 1, 3, 5, 7. And those are your first 8 measures of Take the A Train. So we talked about what the chords are, how they're related to each other. So now let's talk about how to solo over them. Our first step would be playing chord outline solos. So we're just going to take the chords that we just went over and play simple ideas using only those notes. So we're going to take a solo, and we're only going to use chord tones. In the beginning, we're just going to do it in root position. So you're going to hear exactly what's going on, and you're going to hear those chord changes. So this is what it would sound like. A 1, a 2, a 2, And that is a simple chord outline solo. So I would practice that a lot before moving on to the next step. The next step is playing a chord outline solo, but not just doing it in root position. In other words, you're going to jump around on the chords, but you're only going to play chord outline solos. You're only going to use chord outline notes. So 1, 3, 5, 7 in each of the chords. So it would sound something like this. So again, I was just using chord tones, but I was just making the song or the solo sound way more interesting because I wasn't just going up and down the chord. I was jumping around in the chord. Now, once you've got that down, the next step is to play scale solos. So we know that our first 2 chords are A major 7. So we're just going to use our A major scale to solo over that. And it would sound something like this. So I just played 2 chords of A major 7. In the beginning, keep it really simple, and as you get more comfortable with it, jump around on the scale a little more. Again, the same concept. We're just using our A major scale to play a solo, a 2-bar solo. Then we hit this B7 flat 5. So we have a couple options here. The first thing that you would probably want to do is chord outline solo it. It's such a weird chord, and the scale that goes with it is a little weird also. So it wouldn't sound bad if you played your A major 7 scale solo going into a B7 flat 5 chord outline solo. So that would sound like this. That is what I have my students do when they first start soloing on a song like this. When it has a weird chord, I say when you hit the weird chord, whether it's a measure or 2 measures, just play a chord outline solo on it so you're nailing the chord tones. Now, another option would be figuring out the scale that goes with it. So if we're looking at the scale, it's based on the B7 scale, which is B major with a flat 7, but it also has a flat 5. So you can just plug those notes in, which would give you B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F, G sharp, A, B. And that would sound like this. Now, if I solo with that, it's going to sound a little weird kind of no matter what I do because the notes don't really make a ton of sense next to each other. This is what a solo would sound like. Sounds a little weird, right? That scale is so close to another scale that sounds a little more normal that I would probably use this scale instead, which is your whole tone scale. A whole tone scale is just a scale that is based on a whole step. So everything goes up by a whole step. So it'd be B, C sharp, D sharp, F, G, A, B. And it would sound like this. And that gives us all of our chord tones. So it gives us the B, the D sharp, the F, the A, and the B again. So that is a really good option to use the solo because then you're hitting the chord tones and you're using a scale that makes more sense. It would sound like this. Again, not as inside sounding as a major scale, but it fits and it sounds way better than the other scale. Okay, so now let's talk about our 2-5-1s. We have B minor 7. For there, you would use your B Dorian minor scale, which is just B to B in the key of A, or B to B with F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. And then it goes to E7, which again is E to E in the key of A. So you would have E to E with F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. And then back to our A major 7. So we have a couple options of what to do to improvise over these chords. The first is just do a chord outline solo, which I already talked about. The second is all of these chords are based on modes in your A major scale. So if you wanted to, you could just play your A major scale over all 4 of these measures and it would work just fine. You wouldn't be playing super inside, but you'd be playing all right notes and it would sound good. That would sound something like this. Again, it sounds pretty good. You don't really hear the chord outline as much, but it sounds fine and it'll work, especially if you're new to reading chords and you're new to improvising over chords. When you can combine the chords into as few keys as possible, the easier it is to get through the song. Now, the final way would be improvising using each scale that goes with each chord. So we already talked about it being the B Dorian minor scale, going into the E mixolydian scale, going into the A major scale. Now, even though all three of those scales have the same key signature, they have different chord tones. So for the B minor 7, you have B, D, F sharp, and A, which are your 1 flat 3, 5 flat 7. For your E7, you have E, G sharp, B, and D, which is just your flat 7, your 1, 3, 5 flat 7. And then your A major 7 is just A major 7. So that would sound like this if you're improvising over it. Again, it's the same notes that we played in the last improv, but you can hear the chord tones and you can hear the chords outlined way stronger. So choose whichever one you want. You can play an A major for all of it, or you can play the chord tones, or you can play the scales that go with each chord. Now, if you look at the first 8 measures of Take the A Train, you have 2 measures of A major 7, then 2 measures of the weird chord, and then a 2-5-1 in A. So you could get away with playing 6 measures of A major 7 and just switching to the chord tones for that B7 flat 5. And you would be totally fine and it would sound really good. Okay, for our second ending, we have a measure of A major 7s, which we've already talked about, so we know how to improvise over that. And then we go E minor 7, A7, D major 7. Again, we have minor 7, dominant 7th, major 7th, and that screams 2-5-1. So the 1 is D major, the 2 is E minor 7, the 5 is A dominant 7th, A7, and then of course the 1 is D major 7. So if you wanted to, you could solo just in the key of D over those chords, or you could do a chord outline solo, but because it's a half measure, you would go 1-3-1-3. That means you play the first and third of your E minor 7, and then the first and third of your A7. So it sounds like this. When you have 2 chords to a measure, it's a good idea to chord outline it because you're going to really hear the movement. So do a chord outline of each of those chords using chord tones from those chords. In other words, 1, 3, 5, 7 that fits the chord. Now again, that's a 2-5-1 that goes into D major 7, and then we have D major 7 for 4 measures, which is great. That's where we can go nuts because saxophone players love our D scale. So all you have to do for that is you can chord outline solo using your D major 7 chord, which would be D, F sharp, A, or C sharp. Or what I would recommend is jamming out using your D major scale because it fits for 4 measures. Then we go to a B7, which is a little weird. It's like, why do we go to a B7 all of a sudden? We all of a sudden have a whole bunch of sharps. That is your major 2. And what they're doing is they're kind of transitioning their way back to the 1, and going to a major 2 is the easy way to do that. So they do a major 2 for 2 measures, which is B7. So that's B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. If you were going to play that chord, or chord outline solo over that, you would just use those 4 notes, B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. It would sound like this. Or if you were going to solo over it, you would use your B mixolydian scale, which is a B scale, so B to B with F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. And it would sound like this. And if you're going to solo using that scale, it would sound like this. So that is the chord that you're probably going to have to work on soloing on the most because it's the hardest one in the song as far as playing a scale. So I would definitely recommend working on your B mixolydian scale. So now we have that 2-5-1 that goes back into A major, except we have that flat 9 for those 2 beats. So you're basically playing an A major scale, and then when you hit the E7 flat 9, you have to switch to an F natural, and if you can bring that out in your solo, it's gonna sound really good. Then we are back to the key of A for 2 measures. So you're gonna be playing your A major scale, Then you have the B7 flat 5, which again, I suggest either playing a chord outline solo or a whole tone solo, whole tone scale solo. And then we are back to a 2-5-1 in the key of A. So you play your A major scale to solo over that. So when you look at this song, for the most part, you're in A major for a whole lot of it. And then over the bridge, you hit D major for half of that. So you're really in two key centers for the majority of the song. So you just have to watch out for those other ones that are not in those two key centers. So like the B7 flat 5 and the B7. And then of course, when you hit the flat 9, going back on that 2-5-1 back into the A section, so the E7 flat 9. Those are the only chords that you really have to look out for. The rest of it, you're pretty much in the key of A major. So I hope that helps you with being able to analyze the chords and being able to improvise over the chords. I strongly suggest getting the app iReal Pro and using that as your backing track. You cannot go wrong with that. Even though all the changes aren't going to be the exact same, this is going to fit really well, and you can also edit the changes so they'll fit the changes that I have here. And you can speed it up and slow it down to any tempo you want. So you can start it off at 120 beats per minute or something and get the song down, and then speed it up into 160s and 180s as you get it down. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you now know how to improvise over the song Take the A Train, I would really appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot.